Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, we're going to do another follow-up to this video and then this video. And the case we're discussing is Morehouse Enterprises versus ATF. Now, there is a lot of things to digest. We have actually not gotten all the way through the pleadings. And I do encourage you to check out the other two videos so you can really get a flavor of this. But this is a lawsuit basically designed to stop ATF's new zero tolerance policy, where they're essentially running around and yanking the licenses of whatever FFL they can get their hands on. The plaintiffs here have drafted some fantastic pleadings, and in one whole section, they ask a question that I think we should all start asking ourselves as well. And the question is, what would happen if the ATF held themselves to their own standards? Okay, so like I said, the case we're talking about again is Morehouse Enterprises versus ATF. We're going to put a link for all the pleadings down below. I encourage all of you to geek out and really read these. These are some really well-crafted, very thorough pleadings here. Now, as you know, the lawsuit is brought by an FFL in the United States District Court in North Dakota to stop ATF's zero tolerance policy. How bad is the zero tolerance policy? If you have not checked out this video right here, I am not BSing you when I say that the ATF has crafted rules and regulations, policies and procedures now where they literally could revoke the license of an FFL for a simple clerical mistake, has nothing to do with transferring a firearm to an unlawful person, and they could do so to an FFL who maybe has 20, 25, 30 years of nothing but perfect compliance. I'm not joking you. It could actually be done. It is not clickbait. Check that video out. So, if that is the standard, that is, that simple clerical mistakes, and let us remember that there were new criteria that the ATF added that says that, listen, if we notified you of the rules, or if you've been a long-time FFL that have complied with all of these rules, well, then we can assume that it was willful because you knew better, okay? And so if we took that standard that the ATF is holding every single one of these FFLs to, and we applied that to the ATF itself, what would the results be? I want to share with you what the plaintiffs thought here because I think the pleadings are really, really well drafted. It should come as no surprise, but ATF does not hold itself to the same standards of perfection with respect to firearm record keeping. And you're sitting there saying, what? The very agency tasked with regulating the firearms industry and, of course, then the record keeping related to the firearms industry does not itself keep good records? You don't say. Tell me more. Christopher Lee Yates. For example, in 2019, Christopher Lee Yates, an ATF contractor, was convicted of stealing thousands of firearms from ATF's Martinsburg, West Virginia headquarters over the course of several years. Even when caught, the theft was not discovered by ATF headquarters, but instead by tracing firearms Yates stole and sold. As part of the Yates scandal, criminal investigators discovered that ATF personnel had deliberately signed certified reports falsely stating that countless firearms had been destroyed, even though the same firearms were later recovered on the streets, clearly not destroyed. Yeah, that's right. The ATF's record said that they had destroyed these firearms. They actually had no freaking clue where they were. But when they started turning up at crime scenes, then the questions started getting asked. Plaintiffs' counsel also points out, if these same violations had been committed by an FFL, license revocation would be swift for having made, quote, a false or fictitious written statement in the FFL's required records or inventory for which disposition could not be accounted for. Yet upon information and belief, not one ATF employee was ever punished for the Yates fiasco. And it appears that the ATF is still not willing to have an open discussion about this fiasco because, as we now find out, even though plaintiff Gun Owners of America submitted a Freedom of Information Act request to the ATF in November of 2019, more than 3.5 years ago, seeking more information regarding the Yates case, ATF has yet to respond. But you see, that's just one example. Let's take a look at the National Firearms Registration and Transfer Record, or what we call the NFRTR, which, as we know, is the big old golden list of all of your NFA items. So any NFA item, whether it's Form 1 or Form 4, is supposed to be on the NFRTR. Another example of ATF's atrocious firearm record keeping is the National Firearms Registration and Transfer Record, NFRTR, the registry of all firearms registered pursuant to the National Firearms Act of 1934. In 2007, the Department of Justice, Office of Inspector General, issued a report entitled The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives National Firearms Registration and Transfer Record, summarizing that NFA branch staff members do not process applications or enter data uniformly into the NFRTR. The staff's variations in completing these tasks result in errors in the NFRTR records, reports, and queries, as well as inconsistent decisions on NFA weapons registration and transfer applications. Have you ever heard of inconsistent decision-making from the ATF? Well, apparently there's more, including, in fact, the OIG reported that comparing the records from ATF and FFLs, it is almost always the FFL with the accurate records, while ATF's records are erroneous. In our survey of IOIs, 46.5% reported that they found a discrepancy between the NFRTR inventory report and a licensee's inventory always or most of the time. Further, 44.4% of respondents said that the discrepancy was due to an error in the NFRTR almost always or most of the time. In comparison, no respondents reported that the error was always on the part of the licensee, and only 2% reported that the error was on the part of the licensee most of the time. But you see, this is not necessarily new. And in the pleadings, we go back and we revisit a former ATF chief, Timothy Bussey, because he has a very checkered past and has made some very colorful comments, but has shed a lot of light on the horrific record keeping of the ATF. This is not a new phenomenon. Rather, the magnitude of ATF's record keeping errors in the NFRTR cannot be understated. As far back as 1995, then NFA branch chief Thomas Bussey openly conceded that our error rate was between 49 and 50%, so you can imagine what the accuracy of the NFRTR could be if your error rate's 49 to 50%. Chief Bussey then beamed that ATF's error rate under his watch had been reduced to below 8%, an error rate that would never be permitted of any FFL. So we know about all of this sloppy record keeping, and the ATF itself, right out of the horse's mouth, has actually admitted to the sloppiness in record keeping. But guess what? When you make them raise their right hand and swear under oath to tell the truth in court, no, they stick to a company line. They essentially have institutionalized perjury. According to the allegations in this pleading, in spite of this monumental level of error in the NFRTR, and that has not improved as of the 2007 OIG report, Chief Bussey stated that ATF's policy was to commit what had been called institutional perjury. Quote, when we testify in court, we testify that the NFRTR database is 100% accurate. That's what we testify to, and we will always testify to that. As you probably well know, that may not be 100% true. So literally, members of the ATF will just flaunt this, okay? And the hypocrisy is deafening here, okay? Because literally they are holding FFLs, some of which have 20 plus years of nothing but perfect compliance, and they are taking their livelihoods over simple clerical errors. Yet they themselves are not even holding themselves to anywhere close, and I mean nowhere even in the same universe as far as standards of what the FFLs are being held to. But you see, as usual, there's even more. Fast and furious. Perhaps ATF's most spectacular failure in recent history is the infamous Operation Fast and Furious, where the agency allowed illegal gun sales in order to track the sellers and purchasers who were believed to be connected to Mexican drug cartels. Of course, ATF did not track anything and usually had no idea as to the whereabouts of the trafficked firearms until, for example, one was used on December 14, 2010 to murder U.S. Customs and Border Protections agent Brian Terry. And of course, the complete disaster that was Fast and Furious has been well documented. But as plaintiff's counsel points out, if any FFL had been involved in or permitted such willful violations of the Gun Control Act or kept such shoddy records, license revocation would have been the least of its worries. Yet to date, no ATF personnel have faced any serious repercussions for the Fast and Furious debacle. And again, to establish the hypocrisy here, the absolute double standard, plaintiff's counsel wisely points out, as with ATF's open admissions about the error-ridden NFRTR, ATF personnel readily admit that they are not immune from committing the very same clerical errors for which they revoke licenses. And they back it up with a little bit of evidence. See Exhibit 5, transcript of the revocation hearing of a Goodlettsville gun shop, March 7th of 2023, where an ATF IOI admitted that she had accidentally misspelled the name of a firearm importer in her report of violations, and that, if the FFL had made the same mistake, it would have been a willful, chargeable violation for falsifying records. And if there are any out there who want to come to ATF's defense, which I get will not be many of my viewers, and say, well, hey, listen, the ATF is not an FFL, and therefore they wouldn't be held to the same standards, you're wrong. Because as the pleadings point out, au contraire, for reasons unknown, the ATF, in fact, has, in the past, maintained at least 4 of its very own federal firearms licenses. In February of 2021, Plaintiff Gun Owners of America submitted a FOIA request to ATF seeking information about these ATF FFLs, including a copy of the ATF's A&D bound books of acquisitions and dispositions. However, to date, ATF has not responded to that request. What is more, as of April 2021, just 2 months after GOA's FOIA request was filed, ATF's nationwide list of FFLs that it publishes on its website no longer includes those FFLs held by ATF. And so, as plaintiff's counsel correctly puts it, in sum, ATF's own horrible history of unaccountable firearm record keeping shows that the agency would never itself be able to achieve anywhere close to the standard of perfection that the ATF, through its unrealistic AAP, demands from the nation's FFLs. Listen, the case once again is Morehouse Enterprises versus ATF. We're going to put links down below. I've had a lot of viewers comment on why the rest of the folks out here in the YouTuberverse aren't paying more attention to this case. I don't know. You'll need to ask them because I'm going to do more videos on this case. Candidly, I think that this is absolutely, positively one of the most important cases kicking around in the entire 2A universe right now, and a case that we all need to carefully watch. I will be doing more videos on it because I have still not gotten all the way through the pleadings. But the bottom line is could the ATF withstand the same scrutiny that they put every FFL through? The answer is hell no, they could not. Listen, you may have more questions about this or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights. Now, you guys should know how to contact Washington Gun Law by now, but if you don't, that information is right down there in the description box. In the meantime, I do want all of you to remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time, is to know what the law is in every situation, how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching, and stay safe.